So some of the movements that came out because of the destruction of the First World War, one was a stream of consciousness. We saw that the First World War caused a huge traumatic situation in the mind of the people. And those terror, trauma, anxiety, all these things talked and compelled the people to think about the consciousness. What consciousness, how much conscious one is, how one is talking to oneself, how one is thinking about one's own existence. So all those things started people talking about, and that part became to be known as stream of consciousness. So in this technique, we will be able to understand that the character is how much conscious and what he thinks of himself, whether he is self-conscious or whether he is having some identity in the society. So all these things we will be talking about in the stream of consciousness. Then various avant-garde movements came like Surrealism, Cubism, Dadaism, Futurism, Expressionism, Imagism, Symbolism. These are the movements that came out because of the First World War. So we will see one by one how these movements came and what does it indicates and how it puts an impression in the culture and author's mind. So the first is stream of consciousness. We saw that the First World War was a very destructive and the millions of people died. And even there was no place to bury the people underground. And those people who were buried underground, they were like seeds, as the seeds are bowed in a plowed field. So the people were buried like a seeds. And the number of deaths were that much that T.S. Eliot called England as the Wasteland in his poem, The Wasteland. So when we'll be talking about that poem specifically, we will be talking about how he is describing the deconstruction, the destruction of England during the First World War, and how England has become a wasteland because there is no place to grow agriculture, there is no place to grow crops. All the places are full of the dead bodies. So at this point of time, talking about stream of consciousness, in spite of that much trauma, still whether people are conscious or not, that is stream of consciousness. So it is a fictional narrative device that depicts the multi dimensions, thoughts and feelings that passes through one's mind. Because mind was the thing which was very much affected by the World War. So in the stream of consciousness, the speaker's thought process is more important. How he is thinking, protagonist thought process is more important. And it is represented as how the protagonist is talking to himself. That means it is depicted as the things or the thoughts overheard in the mind, or when one is addressing to oneself. So it is also known as interior monologue. When we were talking about Robert Browning, there we saw dramatic monologue, but here it is interior monologue. Reason being, it talks about the interior mind. So known as interior monologue. So you should remember this term also, interior monologue and stream of consciousness. Both are same. So who coined this term, stream of consciousness? This was coined by William James in his book, The Principles of Psychology. So it's a psychological term, as we are talking about trauma and anxiety, neurosis. So obviously this is a psychological term, and just if you know that it's a psychological term, you will be able to remember the title of the work in which it was coined. Very important, who coined the term and in which book it was coined. So The Principles of Psychology is the title of the book in which it appeared in the year 1890. Before the First World War started, the some skirmish wars, small wars already started in 1890s itself, and this William James have already evolved the precursors of the stream of consciousness in this book. In the year 1918, although William James have coined this term only, he has never thought of that this term will be applied into literature. So after the First World War, in the year 1918, May Sinclair first applied the term this stream of consciousness while he was making a review of Dorothy Richardson's novel. So this time he was the first one who applied this term stream of consciousness in a literary context. So again, very important. In 1918, it was first used in the literary context by May Sinclair while he was making review of the novels of Dorothy Richardson. And James Joyce and Virginia Woolf are the two British authors who have prominently used stream of consciousness, along with one American novelist as well. Can someone of you tell me who has used stream of consciousness from American literature? Anyone?
Maybe Poe, sir, Edgar Allan Poe.
Edgar Allan Poe, not exactly. It is William Faulkner. Okay, so sometimes they may ask a question to identify the novels which are related to a stream of consciousness techniques. So here is a list of few of the important novels. These are the 4 novels by Virginia Woolf written in the form of stream of consciousness technique. Mrs. Dalloway, To the Lighthouse, The Waves, and A Rooms of One Own. Then these are the novels by William Faulkner, The Sound and the Fury, Light in August, Absalom, Absalom, As I Lay Dying. These are the 4 novels by William Faulkner. And James Joyce, Ulysses, and A Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man. These 2 are written in the form of stream of consciousness techniques. Then On the Road by Jack Kerouac, The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust. So these are the prominent novels that are written in the stream of consciousness techniques. All the list will be reaching to you in the PDF. So you just to by heart and go through this very important points. Now coming to the next movement, that is the Cubism. It was again started. Anyone want to ask anything?
Sir, I have a doubt, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, psychological novel and stream of consciousness novel, these are the same, sir?
Stream of consciousness is the part of psychology. Okay. Because psychology was not that much evolved during this time. The first work was written in 1899 by Sigmund Freud, The Interpretation of Dreams. So the psychoanalytical things were not that much developed. But once we are talking about the mind, obviously it talks about the psychology. But psychology is a very bigger term, very broader term, which consists of various things, various types of disorders. This stream of consciousness is one among that product. Got it, Sumana?
Yes, sir.
So we can say it's a branch of psychology.
So it's a part of psychology.
Yes, psychology is a broader term. Okay, coming to Cubism, that's another avant-garde movement. This is especially about painting and sculpture. Once we are talking about cube, C-U-B-E. So the cubes is something like the 3-dimensional in shape. So this movement was talking about the 3-dimensional picture of the things. Before that, 1910, we have not seen anything the 3-dimensional. Only 2 dimensions were existing before this period. So this was the period of Cubism, where three-dimensional things, nowadays you can see five-dimensional, six-dimensional things are existing, even eight-dimensionals. So this was the time when three-dimensional thing came for the first time in music, literature, and architecture, especially in painting and sculpture. So people started painting three-dimensional images. And the primary influence was made by Paul Cézanne. He made the three-dimensional form in his work, in his painting. And after that, this movement started, and it got very much fame. After that, three-dimension, then four-dimension, all these forms developed. So this term was broadly used in arts, painting, sculpture, and it was started in Paris in 1910, and it continued throughout 1920s. So this was the basic idea of Cubism, not much important, but sometimes they may ask to arrange some movements in chronological order. This movement was pioneered by later on Pablo Picasso and George Braque. These are the two famous painters of the age. So they also made several three-dimensional paintings in their lives. So I hope you have got the idea of Cubism.
Yes, sir.
Moving on to Imagism, a very important movement propounded by Ezra Pound. So this was an Anglo-American poetry poetic movement that originated in 1912. Let's try to understand from the term itself, image. Writing of poetry through images. So it has the origin, we can say, in the primary and secondary imagination by S.T. Coleridge, where he talked about the importance of secondary imagination. So here Imagism talks about how images can be used, not the originality, only the images. How the images can be used to glorify the beauty. We will also understand this term through a very famous poem. So Imagism advocated the use of free verse. So we saw in the modern period that after a sprung rhythm by G.M. Hopkins, in modern period, the writers, the poets started using free verse. That means there is no meter, no rhyme scheme. Common speech pattern, day-to-day life pattern, and clarity of expressions are there through the use of precise images as a reaction to Victorian sentimentalism. So in the Victorian period, where the Victorian poets were using sentiments to express their emotions, this imagist poets started using images to express their emotion. So the main proponents of this movement are T.E. Hume, Ezra Pound, Amy Lowell, and Hilda Dolittle. These are the very famous ones, always asked in the exam. So you must by heart these four names at least: T.E. Hume, Ezra Pound, Amy Lowell, and Hilda Dolittle. Apart from that, there are some more names: Richard Aldington, William Carlos William, and J.G. Fletcher. So these are the main proponents of Imagism. Very important names. The first one, at least the first four, you must remember: T.E. Hume, Ezra Pound, Amy Lowell, and H.D. stands for Hilda Dolittle. So these Imagist poets were influenced by Japanese haiku poems. Japanese haiku is very famous because they are only 3 lines poem. The complete poem are having only 3 lines. And in that 3 lines, we have only 17 syllables. Only 17 syllables. And all the 3 lines are written in blank verse. Haiku is a Japanese word that means a small 3 lines poem. 17 syllables. First and last line 5 syllables, and middle line 7 syllables. First line 5 syllable, second line 7 syllable, and the third line 5 syllable, altogether 17 syllable. So that's again a very important question that is asked in the exam. How many syllables are there in a haiku poem? Or sometimes they may ask how many lines are there in a haiku poem. So these Imagist poets were too much influenced by haiku poem, and they started writing very small poems, whether it's T. E. Hume or Ezra Pound or Richard Aldington. All of them has written small poems in the form of haiku poems. In 1913, the year in which it was started, again very important. Imagism was in 1913, and in this year, why it is known as it is only in 1913, because Ezra Pound has published a haiku-like poem, not exactly written in the form of haiku, but yes, we can say that is a very small poem in which there are only 14 words written in 2 lines only, 2 lines poem. It's the complete poem is only in 2 lines, and the title is In a Station of the Metro. This poem was written by Ezra Pound when he was making a visit in France, Paris. And when he was traveling in the train, he was passing through a metro station. Although it is not known that whether he was riding inside the train or he was just outside standing on the platform, but the images that he saw on the platform or maybe inside the train, that he has described in this poem. So the title is again very important. In Station of the Metro. Setting is in Paris, France, written in 1913. So this is the complete poem. This is only 2 lines poem. We have only 14 words in the entire poem. Now let's see the apparition of these faces in this crowd. So he is talking about the platform. He may be standing on the platform, or sometimes it is possible he may be traveling inside the train. So he writes that the apparition of these faces, so faces of the people who are traveling in the train or on the platform, it is used as image. So I'm just trying to make you understand about how image is used in writing the poetry. So he says that the appearance, the apparition, the appearance of these faces in the crowd, when he is able to see the faces of the people in the crowd. So the faces, these faces are used as a symbol. The face of the people is a symbol. So what he realized when he is looking at the faces of the people, he realized that these faces are just like petals on a wet black bow. It is like petals of the flower. Those faces are looking like petals. They all are. It looks like it's a summer season. They all are wet in sweating. So they are just wet. Their body is wet, and their faces looks like a petal. That is a petal that is stick to a black bow, a black branch of tree. So the appearance of these faces in the crowd are just looking like it is petals, flower petals on a wet black bow. The branch of tree is completely wet, and on that wet branches some petals are stuck. So you can see there is no literal connection between the first line and the second line. No literal connection. But here he is using the image of petals to express the beauty of those faces in the crowd. So to understand the meaning and the sense and emotion of the poem, you will have to you have to imagine how petals on a wet black bow looks like. So when we talk about imagination, when we talk about images, to understand the emotion and meaning of the poem, it is known as Imagist movement. I hope you have got the idea of Imagism, why we call it Imagist movement.
Yes, sir.
Anyone want to ask any doubt? Otherwise, I'll move on to the next movement. This Imagist poetry or haiku poetry is also known as verbless poetry. Sometimes they have asked this question, who has written verbless poetry? So you will not find any kind of is, are, am, V1, V2. So this type of verbs are not used in this complete poem. So that is the reason it is known as verbless poetry. Okay, so we saw that Imagism was a movement in the year 1913, just an year before the First World War. Now, after the First World War started in the year 1914, people started thinking about avant-garde, that what is going to happen in the coming future. So a literary movement started after Imagism, that was known as Dadaism. Dadaism started in the year 1916 and it came, or we can say it emerged out of the First World War, in which people saw the disgust with brutality and barbarism of the First World War. And it was a literary and artistic movement. At which place it started? It started in the place Switzerland. European avant-garde Zurich. Zurich was the name of the place where it started. It lies in Switzerland. The name Dada was selected by a group of people or the grade of artists who symbolized their emphasis on the illogical and irrational things. So as I said that when the First World War started, people started thinking the world as illogical, immoral, irrational. That means there is no existence of anything in this world, what people started thinking of. So this movement also started from the same attitude. The group of artists symbolized such illogical, irrational, immoral ideas, and they called it Dada, or the name came Dadaism. So this main proponent of this movement was Tristan Tzara, a very important name. He was the one who was the leader of this movement, Dadaism. So this name is very, very important. Apart from that, they may also ask some other names. So some other associated members of this movement were Marcel Duchamp, Max Ernst, Man Ray. These four names, if you can remember, it will be all right. Otherwise, you must remember Tristan Tzara. So this Dadaism was made to make the traditional values to nullify, because now after the First World War, no tradition was existing. All the traditions, traditional values, cultures, norms, rules and regulations, everything was vanished. Everything was nullified. So what conclusion we can draw, that Dadaism is a movement that came out of brutality, barbarism, and it is a literary movement, also an artistic movement, and the main theme of is to make the things irrational, illogical, immoral. So these people who were concerned with Dadaism movement, they started writing their pamphlets, and those pamphlets were full of illogical and irrational thinkings. Any doubt in Dadaism? Anyone? Okay, so you must
Sir, can you
yes.
tell me any work in which there is some reflection of this movement? So can you name any work?
Yeah, the very important work, The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. There he has mentioned so many
Okay, sir.
illogical and irrational thinking.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you.
So this Dadaism used nonsense and ridiculing sense of imagery to emphasize the meaninglessness of the modern world. So the people started thinking the life is totally meaningless because no one was very sure that how many days they are going to live. Anytime they can be killed in the war. So this movement was very short-lived, started in 1916 and ended in the year 1923 because there was one more powerful movement started in the very next year, 1924. So that is the reason this was automatically diminished. So the next movement that started in 1924 is Surrealism. So it is again a cultural movement and it came after Dadaism. It also talks about literature, art, sculpture, and it emerged in Paris. Dadaism started in which country?
Switzerland.
Switzerland.
Zurich. Yeah, Zurich,
Switzerland, sir.
Zurich, Switzerland. Very right. And who was the propounder of the movement?
System Zara.
Tristan Zara. Very right. So the Surrealism movement was started by Andre Breton. And it started in 1924 after the publication of Andre Breton's work, Manifesto on Surrealism. So Breton's Surrealist Manifesto defined Surrealism as a psychic automatism. Psychic automatism means the people are psychologically weak and their mind is something like automized in such a way that mind automatically starts thinking that they do not exist. Automation process in the mind has started because of looking at those destruction of the First World War. So we can see that this movement was shaped by Freud's theory of the subconsciousness. This was the time when psychological theory by Sigmund Freud has catch up, and he has started taking those psychological traumas, the patients of psychological traumas, into his own clinic. So all the people who were traumatized because of the First World War, they were treated in the clinic of Sigmund Freud. So Surrealists believed in the superiority of the irrational and the unconscious and the unexpected things. Whereas in Dadaism, we found that the things are irrational, the things are immoral, but here we can see that the things are talking about unconsciousness and unexpected things. So the people's trauma, the people's fear and anxiety were more about the future. And when those anxieties was sustaining for a longer time, it was making their unconscious part of the mind. Anyone will explain what do you understand by unconscious of mind, unconsciousness of mind? This psychoanalysis is completely a study of the unconscious mind, nothing else. Any idea?
Sir, as Sigmund Freud has divided our mind into three parts and conscious, subconscious, and unconscious, and he says that most of the time what we do actually there are so many desires that we suppress just because of the fear of the society that society will not accept this thought and those thoughts are not actually over at all. These thoughts are recollected or you can say collected in our unconscious mind means we also sometimes we also are not aware about those thoughts. if I give an example, we see in dreams, we see so many visions, and we are also not quite sure about that. That when we have thought about you can say those things. Suppose that there is a desire in our mind. We want to possess something, but because of the fear of rejection, we have suppressed those things. So that is collected in our unconscious mind. So we can say that it is just a collection of our suppressed desires. And
Very right.
sometimes unconsciously we just expresses that, like just because of a slip of tongue, we just expresses that. So
Very right. Very well said.
that is,
Very well said.
yes,
Okay,
sir.
so just if you want to read someone's unconscious mind, if you talk to someone, what are the things hidden inside will automatically come out. So the same thing is done by the psychoanalyst or the psychologist. So if you happen to visit some psychologist just for the sake of enjoyment, so you will try to find out that they will do the normal talkings with you, and during that talking you will automatically reveal few facts which are hidden inside, and you have not shared those facts with anyone for a long time, and you are very much eager to share those thoughts with someone who cannot share your secrets with anyone else. So we feel like the psychologists are those people who have no connection with our family members, and they will never share our secrets, our hidden desires with anyone. So we are generally tend to reveal the secrets in front of the psychologists. So they are reading the unconscious part of the mind. What is hidden? What is troubling you? What is stuck inside you? So very well explained by Pratigya. So the surrealist believed that there is a superiority of the unconscious mind. So what is going to happen unexpectedly was more important for them. So they revolted against all controls and restraints on creativity through techniques such as automatic writing, self-hallucination, exploitation, trance states. So these were the areas where they revolted, because these were the areas which were very prominent during those times. So just to have a control on hallucination, dreams, trances, all those things were to be controlled. So for that, they started this movement, Surrealism movement. So again, some prominent figures are important. Andrew Bratton, Louis Aragon, Salvador Dali, Paul Eliot. I need not to remember all the names, but you must remember this Andrew Bratton. Very important. And his name, Manifesto on Surrealism. Year of publication, 1924. In which year Surrealism started? That is again very important. Then we'll move on to the next movement called Symbolism. It was again started in France. Venkat, can you mute yourself?
Okay, sir.
Sir,
Thank you. Yes, please.
sir, in short, surrealism is all about future anxiousness.
Surrealism is all about?
Future anxiousness and the things which have not happened yet now.
Yeah, future anxiousness. Very right.
Okay. So just for the confirmation I was asking. Thank you, sir.
Yes. Coming to symbolism, like Imagism, where one is expressing the emotions in the form of images, but here we are expressing the emotions or thoughts in the form of symbols. Like when we were reading about G.M. Hopkins, he has used several symbols like white flower, lilies, stars. These are the symbols depicted in a poem. So this symbolism was also a late 19th century movement. It started in France, Russia, Belgium, and these all countries it started.
Sir,
Yes, please.
so then what is the difference between image and the symbol, sir?
In images, we saw that when we are talking about the in a station of the metro by Ezra Pound, he has used the images like weight petals on a weight branch of the tree. So he has used those images, and those images are compared with the faces of the people in the crowd. So it's just like a comparison, and he is not dignifying the beauty of that petals. Rather, he is trying to dignify the beauty of those faces. Opposite to this, in symbolism, those symbols itself glorify its beauty. If you remember the Pied Beauty poem, 7 stars in the hair, 3 lilies in hand. So they are self-explanatory, who are glorifying its own meaning. We need not to compare with anyone. We need not to create 2 images to compare. Are you getting?
Yes, sir.
So in symbolism, it was started in France, Russia and Belgium, and it started in 1857 by Charles Baudelaire. Charles Baudelaire was a French philosopher and the poet also. He wrote Les Fleurs du Mal, The Flowers of Evil, followed by the works of Edgar Allan Poe was also included. So it was a movement in literature first published in 1899, the Symbolist movement in literature. This was the name of the complete work, Symbolist movement in literature. And some other material will also added in the 1919. It's a work by Arthur Symons, who is also associated with French symbolism. So if we talk about the origin lies in France in the work of Charles Baudelaire. But it was popularized by Arthur Symons. So if the question is asked about the origin, you must know it is Charles Baudelaire's The Flowers of Evil. And who popularized this movement? It was Arthur Symons after the publication of his work, The Symbolist Movement in 1899. So here symbols are used to signify the ideas and qualities by giving them some symbolic meanings that are different from their literal sense. Symbolism is an object representing another to give an entirely different meaning that is much deeper and more significant. For instance, a smile is a symbol of friendship. So if a poet is using the word smile, it represents many things. Like when we give a smile to someone, that may be giving different meanings. So here words are not used. In place of words, symbols are used. So sometimes we can say smile is a symbol of friendship, smile is a symbol of love, smile is a symbol of jealousy. So even one symbol represents many things. So the action of someone smiling at you may stand as a symbol of feeling of affection, feeling of hates, feeling of jealousy, feeling of shame, anything it can be. So such words which represents the poetic meaning other than the literal meaning. The literal meaning of a smile is very simple. But if you talk about the poetic meaning, it can represent various meanings.